Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Freighter. With most of the nation's institutions compromised by corruption and other vices, it is becoming increasingly important for the local church to remain vigilant in its defense of morality and godly order. Unfortunately, some persons, especially those who just pop up without training and calling, who call themselves pastors, are giving the church a bad name and fueling skepticism about the church. Presently, there are several Jamaican pastors who are now languishing in prison, while others have cases before the court, primarily for the sexual abuse of children, both boys and girls, and in at least one case, being a major player in a criminal gang. One of the most horrifying acts committed by a so-called pastor revolves around the Hanover-based pastor Phillip Scott, who was sentenced to 23 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 7 girls who were members of his congregation. It should also be noted he is also under investigation for 10 similar offences which are still to be tested before the courts. While the church as a collective body condemns the behavior of persons like Scott, with some even calling for a person to be trained and certified to be duly recognized as pastors, the sad truth is that the damage has already been done, and the church's image has taken a colossal beating. In this edition of Lest You Forget, I will be looking at the atrocities of Pastor Scott and his court trials and sentencing from 2 stories I wrote for the Gleaner, which were published under the headline Hanover Pastor and Child Rape Charges, published on December 14, 2019, and Hanover Pastor Pleads Guilty to Sex Crimes, published on June 9, 2021. First story read as follows. A pastor based in Hanover has been charged with 7 counts of rape with children from several Western Jamaica communities among his alleged victims. He is scheduled to appear in court on Tuesday. The police have not disclosed his name. We can confirm that a pastor was arrested on rape charges, but we cannot provide you with any more information than that which was released by the Jamaica Constabulary Force Corporate Communication Unit, a senior police officer in Hanover told the Gleaner yesterday. However, the Gleaner has since learned that the accused pastor is originally from the Norwood community in St. James and may have associations with a religious group that appear to be on the radar of the police. We are not even sure of his correct name because he goes by several names. A resident of the Sandy Bay community where he was arrested told the Gleaner yesterday. We are hearing that several children have been molested by this man, so we are anxious to see what will come out in court, the resident added. According to the police statement, patrolmen saw the accused pastor beating a child at a location on Barnes Lane in the Montpelier community in Sandy Bay on Monday, December 10. During their investigations, allegations of sexual misconduct were made against the pastor. Subsequently, statements were taken by the Hanover branch of the Center for Investigation of Sexual Offences and Child Abuse, which led to additional allegations of sexual offences being leveled against the pastor by other children and their relatives. The pastor was subsequently arrested and charged. Allegations of sexual exploitation by religious groups recently surfaced in Montego Bay, resulting in the police raiding the Cahal Yahweh Church in Norwood, St. James, and forcibly removing several children whose relatives had accused the organization of exploiting the children sexually and otherwise. It was alleged that the Yahweh group was condoning marriage between girls as young as 15 years old and much older men. Some of the youngsters were reportedly impregnated by the men assigned to them as husbands by the group. The second story read as follows. Pastor Phillip Scott, who was arrested in late 2019 for allegedly sexually molesting at least 7 underage girls across several communities in Hanover, has pleaded guilty and is to be sentenced on July 8 in the Hanover Circuit Court. Scott still has 2 other sex assault cases ongoing in the courts of Hanover and St. James, said Superintendent Sharon Beeput, the police commander for Hanover. He is to appear in court in Hanover on July 6 for a rape and in the St. James Parish Court on July 17. Scott initially gave his name as O'Neill Palmer at the time of his arrest, but it was later discovered that the declaration was fictitious. The 2019 allegation arose after a police patrol reportedly saw Scott beating a child. After intervening, the police discovered that she was allegedly being abused by Scott. Subsequent to Scott's arrest, several parents went to the police with other underage girls, claiming that the newly convicted Scott had also molested them. It was also later discovered that the child rescued from the beating was pregnant. Since Scott's arrest, the child has had a baby, which has been tied to Scott by a DNA test, said Beeput, who recently declared war on sexual predators in the parish after a string of similar offences. Scott's conviction and Monday's arrest of a St. James pastor who allegedly raped a 15-year-old congregant have again turned the spotlight on Jamaica's crisis of child sex abuse and concerns about perceived light sentencing of offenders. Pastors Charles Brevet and Glenn Samuels have condemned the scourge of sexual abuse as ungodly. If a pastor who is supposed to be the defender of moral principles get involved at that level, it should cause some concerns, said the outspoken Brevet, who leads the flock at King's Seventh-day Adventist Church in Mount Salem, St. James. Brevet said he is disappointed that the church is not insulated against such scandals. We should not be surprised, because Lucifer was in God's presence and Judas was under Jesus' arm, he said. Samuels, president of the West Jamaica Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, says he is particularly disturbed by the allegations, as the church should be a safe place for children, especially those in vulnerable situations. This is a troubling issue, and it cuts across denominations and professional circles. It is worse when it is among church folks, because if there is any place where young people ought to feel safe, it should be among those who claim to be connected to Christ, said Samuels. In looking back at this story and the damage that it has done to the image of the church, it is definitely one of those unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica. Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Fruita. Before you go, please remember to subscribe.